Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome General Manager, Visual Studio Team System for the Microsoft Corporation, Rick LaPlante.
Thank you. Good morning. You know, it is a very exciting time to be part of the tools division at Microsoft. We have really turned a corner in the way that we think about Visual Studio. In June of 1999, we made a major decision about the future of Visual Studio, and we challenged ourselves to think about how could we move from a developer tool to a world-class solutions development suite. Now, those words may seem subtle to you, but I think at the end of this presentation, at least I hope at the end of this presentation, you'll agree that by taking that and internalizing the difference between developer tool and development suite, we will drive a significant value for our customers, and it really changes the way that we build and think about Visual Studio. So one of the things that we had to do in June of 1999 was we had to think about what would the value proposition of the customer be? Now, why would people want to buy this? How would we make them more productive? And we came up with a very simple guiding goal that exists still today, and I think it'll exist for many years to come. And that goal was that we needed to be able to substantially increase the predictability and consistency of success for teams building software solutions. Now, it was about predictability, being able to say that not just 1 out of 5 times or 2 out of 5 times, but 5 out of 5 times. We were predictable, and it was about consistent success. And success is measured as meeting the business expectation, delivering the business value, while at the same time meeting the cost expectations. So then we said, well, what are we going to do differently? There was a lot of tools in the market at the time in the software development lifecycle space. And we said, well, what are we going to do differently that's going to make us be able to deliver this value? And we came up with 3 driving principles. The first principle was really a focus on productivity. And, a lot of people think about productivity and then they think about ease of use, an approachable design. And that's super important. I mean, that's really the first part of productivity. You want to make sure that what the user's experiencing is easy and comfortable and knowledgeable, easily found, discoverable. But that's really just the first part. The second part is that we wanted to make sure that we were using the right tools for the right job. And we quickly realized that there were so many tools on the market, there were a lot of partners, and then there were tools, even that Microsoft shipped in terms of Project and Office, and there was no reason to build, new tooling when in fact what we really wanted to do is we wanted to enable the customers to use the right tool at the right time, but still share the user experience, which was super important. And that's a very big change from what was before. How many of you, and it's hard to see out there, but how many of you actually use software development lifecycle tools today? Okay, pretty much a vast majority of you. So that market is in some ways defined, unfortunately, today by a bit of complexity, and it's sort of defined by the need for consulting. And so a lot of times you'll see when you acquire tools, you got to acquire consulting to figure out how to roll them out and how to use them. And so we had a mantra around productivity that really focused the team. And the mantra was our process, your process, no process, productivity day 1 out of the box. So our goal is that the day you get these tools, you install it with a common installer, you understand how to use them, and you will be productive day 1 out of the box, whether you're using our process, your process, or no process in terms of an agile process. So the second key principle, productivity was the first key principle. The second key principle was integration. Now, I've been working in the tools business at Microsoft for about 16 years, and so I've run a lot of projects. And people say running projects is like herding cats, and that's actually a good analogy. But I think I have a better analogy. Running projects is, and large team projects, is like taking a grate, like you'd find on your barbecue, and taking a bag of marbles, and trying to roll those marbles across the grate and getting them to the other side. Now, every marble that came in the box was super important. And in fact, some were even more important than others, but you didn't know which. So you had to get every marble from the beginning of the grate to the other end of the grate. The analogy holds very well when you think about the transitions between roles in a life cycle. So the transition between the developer and the tester, or the business stakeholder and the project manager. Those transitions are holes in the grates. And the more transitions that you have between your roles and between the phases of your life cycle, between development and testing and pre-ops and ops, those create holes in the grate, and they create opportunities for you to lose your marbles in more ways than one. No holes. Integration is about no holes. So we designed the infrastructure from the beginning to make sure that we could deeply integrate the data across these tools in a very seamless, I'll use the phrase a lot, a friction-free data flow. And what do I mean by friction-free? If you make a person, whether it's a developer or a tester or a project manager, go out of their normal flow of the normal things that they're doing during the day to actually report data, to push data back to the server, to go to a document and update data. Now, I'm not going to say they won't do it, but I think you all know maybe they won't do it. They may not do it consistently. But what you've done is you've introduced friction into the system. At a minimum, it is more difficult for them to get their job done. With the Visual Studio Team System, it's all about friction-free flow of data. And that friction-free flow of data gives you visibility. So the third key principle was extensibility. And we realized that we needed to build a platform to enable a rich third-party ecosystem. We weren't building a single product or even a set of products. We were building a platform, and that's the way we designed it. Our goal is to create a mass market for software development lifecycle tools, which doesn't exist today. It'd be hard to call what the market for software development lifecycle tools is a mass market. But if you think about it, if you create a mass market, the breadth of the market and then the depth of each of the verticals, is enormous. And the way that you solve that is you solve that with a rich partner ecosystem. And so we took the first steps and we said, you know what? We're going to expose what we use. We're going to build tools and a platform, and then we're going to expose that platform to all of our partners so that they can extend our offering or they can add completely new functionality. The essence here with extensibility is don't make the customers choose between a great partner tool and a great integrated solution. The customers hate it. So then we spent some time with customers, and we saw a couple of interesting trends, and I just want to touch on them here really quickly. The first one that we saw was development teams still live in silos, right? This could be any team, this could be many teams at Microsoft, it could be many teams in your organizations, I suspect. And the problem with silos is all of these people have their own view of what the project state is, their own view of what we were trying to accomplish. They all have their own view of the data. So the tester has all sorts of data about the quality, all sorts of data that they're doing the analysis around. But how is that data shared and leveraged by all of the other roles? Doesn't happen. So by a show of hands, and I suspect everybody, by a show of hands, how many of you have been in this meeting? Whatever happened to fill in the blank? Whatever happened to that feature? Whatever happened to that date? With the corresponding answer of, well, I thought you were going to do it, or we moved that date. How many have been in that meeting? Yep, pretty much everybody. I've been in more than I can count. So silos are a bad deal. Like, silos create friction in the system. Now, it turned out I didn't realize how prevalent this was until I went and I did a customer visit about 1.5 years ago. And it was a large auditorium, probably about maybe half this size. And they asked me to come and do a talk on designing for operations and bringing the operations teams and the engineering staff together. And so I went through my normal talk about design for operations, talked about our white horse tooling and how the SDM was going to bring these together. And as I was talking about the operations stuff, I just noticed, like, all these people over here were, yeah, and they were nodding and all right. And then as I started talking about the importance of application architectures, all these people over here were like, yeah, no, this is great. This is really good. And I had to stop. And I just thought, no, this is strange. So I said, how many of you, and it was a big room, how many of you are, from the IT side? And it was everybody on this side of the room. And I said, so how many of you are from the application architecture side? And it was everybody on this side of the room. And I kid you not, and there was no assigned seating. There was no bride side and groom side, right? This was self-selected, silo thinking in action, right? So this is something that you have to get out of. And with the team system, we really focus on breaking out of those silos. So top performing teams know they have to get out of the silos for several reasons. One of them is they're becoming more geographically distributed. Causes more problems. The second one is teams are becoming more specialized. So they're getting more roles, and those roles create more data, and if you don't integrate that data, you have more silos. The third one is that they need to have the ability to react quickly. And if you don't have everybody on the same page with what you're trying to build and the state of the project, you can't do that. Top performing teams are all about sharing data. And it was a very interesting learning for us that it was as much about communication and data flow as it was about anything else. So when we think about top performing teams, we think about this communication, we think about no more silos, we think about this friction-free data flow. And what we really think about is how there's no one-size-fits-all process. That every team is different. And so we needed to make sure we built a tool that not only enabled this friction-free flowing of data, but that also didn't enforce any particular methodology, but could enforce your methodology. So we have built the Visual Studio Team System from the ground up to do three things. Reduce the complexity of delivering modern systems, to facilitate communication across your team, and to enable a vibrant third-party ecosystem. So with that, I am very pleased to sort of unveil the Visual Studio Team System. Now, we've done a lot of sort of early briefings, and I think you saw some of the tools at the keynote yesterday, but this is the Visual Studio Team System in its gory detail. There is a lot of stuff on this slide. The breadth of the new team system is pretty amazing. There are role-based products for architects and developers and testers. There's a new server-based product that supports the integration of all of these pieces of information and the teams coming together. And there's a lot of new functionality here, and over the next 4 days, if you attend the breakouts, what you're going to see is this slide with drill downs into almost every area that's shown on this slide. There are a lot of Meet the Technologist sessions where people from my team and myself will be in the cabana lounges, just willing to talk about our experience and what we've built. But instead of talking much more about the team system, I think what we decided to do is really to just show you the power of integration and the power of the team system in action through a fictitious company called AdventureWorks and a couple of days in the life at AdventureWorks. So with that, I'm going to ask Lori Lampton to come out and start this project off for us. Hi, Lori.
Hi, Rick. Well, we're really busy here at AdventureWorks. We just signed a contract with Wingtip Toys, and we need to upgrade our web application to not only sell sporting equipment, but also sell toys. So we also want to add a new option for our customers to be able to pick up their merchandise in the store. So we have several new upgrades that we'd like to do. I need to kick off a project right away. In the past, this took me a lot of time. I'd have to configure a lot of different tools, collect all my specification templates and all the information associated with the project, and pull it together. With Visual Studio Team System, this is all done for me in a simple wizard. Excuse me, I went a little fast there. So I can create a new project, and I can select what process my team has chosen to use. 2 processes come with Visual Studio Team System, or I can create my own. And this includes all the workflow transitions and specifications and documents I want to work with. It automatically creates a portal based on SharePoint services, and I can branch my source code tree, all from within one simple wizard.
So Lori, are you using a project definition that came out of the box with the Visual Studio Team System there?
Well, Rick, we started with that, but we wanted to add some additional check-in policy. So we customized the process to meet our organization's needs.
Great.
So I'm going to use one of the templates that came with Visual Studio Team System. Whenever I start a new project, I always create a checklist of the critical work that needs to be done in each project phase. This template comes right out with my process choice in Visual Studio. Since I'm early on here in the project, I can see I'm collecting requirements and getting architecture going. This is just in Excel, and I can add new work items, or I can make work assignments, change resolutions and priorities, and publish the information right to my team.
So Lori, I've used Excel quite a bit for project management, but the biggest problem has always been having people to update the data and keeping this data real.
Yeah, well, with Visual Studio Team System, when I publish this information, updates are sent to the master database. So the team members get work items in their queues for each of these tasks.
Great. Well, I see us assign some work to Jim, so maybe I'll go talk to Jim and see how it's going.
That's right. My architect should get going.
Hey, Jim. How you doing?
Pretty good, Rick.
Good. So what do we got going today?
Well, let's see what's going on today. I see that I just received a work item from Lori to update the architecture to support our new Wingtips extension project. So what I do here as an infrastructure architect at AdventureWorks is try to take all of our myriad of data center policies and procedures and put them into a format that makes sense to our solution architects. So when they build applications, they can build them in such a way that they understand the constraints of our data center and they'll deploy right the first time.
Great.
The problem with that is that in the past, I've used diagrams similar to the one that you see on the screen here, as well as a bunch of different documents that convey all the different policies and procedures. And I usually package them all up in a book that I have to give to our application architects. And the problem with that is that he's got to sift through all of the information to find the stuff that is relevant for him. It's usually just a small portion. Oftentimes he misses things. And in other cases, he interprets things in a way that I didn't necessarily intend for them to be interpreted. So it doesn't always work out so well. And the way that usually plays out is when we get to deployment time, and we try to deploy that application, of course, you know, we're 2 weeks from going live with this big new functionality that's going to make our company money. And we find all kinds of problems. And we go back and forth, and I'm getting called and paged nonstop for 2 weeks straight. And it's just not very productive. With Visual Studio Team System, though, a lot of that has changed for us. It works out much better for me. So as I said, I have a diagram in front of me here. And it's similar to diagrams that I used to create in Visio, but it's very different. So, for example, I've got on here some security zones, pretty standard ways that I set up communication boundaries in my environment. Typically, I have firewalls that sit between these and limit the flow of traffic between these different security zones. So, of course, I have the internet. I have a DMZ where our web servers sit. And then I've got our internal network where database servers sit. So right now, I've got our existing IS web server that hosts our AdventureWorks application. And I've got that communicating with a SQL server that sits back here in a more secure area of our network. Then, of course, internet clients are allowed to communicate inbound to our application server. Now I'll show you where things get a little bit different. In the past, this was just a static Visio diagram. But with Visual Studio Team System, I can now model actual settings and constraints for our data center. And in fact, I have on this web server, our current security policy does not allow web services to run on that. So I've got this box unchecked here, so where only web content can run on this. And it's important to note that we certainly don't only have one web server in our environment. It is logical, and it represents one or more physical web servers. So in our environment, this actually represents a load balance cluster of 8 different web servers that are configured essentially identically. So I only represent that with one here. So web services is disallowed, and obviously that's not going to work out so well because as part of this project, we need to host a web service. So I talked to our security department, and they did a risk analysis, and they decided that we would be able to host those web services, but that it would be required that we run those on a separate host from our web content.
Okay, that makes sense.
So I'm going to simply add a new host to the diagram, and I'll call that our web server services, so it's a little more meaningful. And on there, I'll additionally set some constraints. So for example, our security policy requires that only the necessary functionality that's needed for this server be running and nothing more. So this doesn't need to host regular web content, just web services. So I'll disallow that. And what I'm doing here, Rick, is doing more than just checking boxes. So you saw Andy's keynote.
Mm-hmm.
He talked a little bit about the Dynamic Systems Initiative and the systems definition model. This is actually the first tool from Microsoft that allows me to manipulate that system definition model. And where this becomes a really important thing is when I then give this diagram over to our solution architects, he doesn't need to sift through this to find the settings. In fact, when he models his application, the tool will tell him if it violates constraints that I've set on the data center. So it allows us to be much more productive.
That's great. I'm actually going to talk to David next, so I hope to get a chance to see that.
Excellent. So the other thing that I want to do here is we don't just allow anybody on the internet to communicate to our web services. We only allow our kiosk clients, which I've already added to the diagram, to communicate and authenticate to our web service. So what I'm also going to add is a requirement that authentication and encryption be required for any session coming into those servers. So now I've added support for our hosting of our web services, but we also have to communicate with a Wingtips web service. And right now, our web server also is not allowed to communicate outbound to the internet. Our security policy only allows inbound connections to it, and I've got that represented here, but no outbound. So again, I talked to our security folks, and they understand that to allow this functionality, something's going to have to change. They did their risk analysis and decided it would be okay as long as we were only communicating outbound to Wingtips service. So I'm going to add a host to represent the Wingtips web service. And of course, I don't control Wingtips web services, but it's just a logical representation, again, just like ours are. So I can represent them the same way. And now what I can do is allow an outbound connection to that. Now again, what I'm representing here is really the fact that physically I'm opening a port outbound, actually to 80 and 443 through my firewall to now allow that web server to talk outbound specifically to the destination IP address of the Wingtips service. And then of course the kiosk client needs to communicate with our new web service. And then of course our web service also talks to our database server. So that takes care of the extensions that I need to make. Again, this diagram will go over to our solution architects, and then he can make his modifications. So I'll go ahead and take that work item that Lori assigned to me, reassign that to our solution architect, and let him know that the data center modifications are complete. And I'll also add another work item. What we found is that our existing AdventureWorks application, it's a little hard for our operations folks to understand what's going on with it. So I'm going to add a work item so when it gets to development, and Lori can keep an eye on this, new instrumentation, better instrumentation gets added to the application, and that a Microsoft Operations Manager management pack is created so that our operations team knows better about what's going on.
Great, Jim. I appreciate you showing me what you're doing. Thanks a lot. So I think David is going to come out, and David is our application architect, and I think he's going to show me what he does with this information that Jim's provided for him.
Thanks, Rick.
So what are you going to do with this, David? Do you do anything with it?
Well, I don't have a monitor here, but I find it makes a great monitor stand. It's about the right size, pretty sturdy. Okay, so Jim's given me a work item, and I need to continue what he did. He extended the data center, and my job as a solution architect is going to be to extend the AdventureWorks application.
Okay.
I need to build the additional services for the Wingtip Toys contract. So to do that, I'm going to go over to a diagram. It's called the application connection diagram. And this designer shows me a couple of things. First of all, it shows me the existing application as it stands today. including a web application, an administration client, and a database, and the connections between those. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to jump in and start designing the additional services of the app. I know that I need a web service. We're going to, for the first time, expose a service for a kiosk client that's going to be out on the internet that's going to consume services. So I can go and create a web service on the design surface and then name it. So the next thing I know I need to do, again, keeping this simple, is build a client, a rich client application that's going to be wired up to that web service. And I'm able to do that just like that.
So David, what really happens when you draw that line there?
So there's a bunch of things that happen beyond just the diagramming. There's configuration that gets created, web references, proxies, just everything that you need to actually bind those two projects in the solution is happening under the covers. And if you make those references in code, we'll be able to actually show them on the diagram through reverse engineering.
Great.
So having gotten that far, I also know that the kiosk web service is going to need to talk to the database, so I can go and wire that up. And the final step is this Wingtip Toys business partner has a web service that they've exposed to us. And I need to be able to put that on my design and show that we're going to consume that external service. So I'm able to do that through what looks like a pretty normal add web reference dialog box. And actually go and look at the service definition that the Wingtip Toys company has given us that we're running in-house, and then go and add a reference to it. And so I'll be able to basically put this on the design surface, wire up to it, and show that it's part of my application architecture. So as soon as that shows up on the design surface, I can wire to it. The nice thing about adding this reference to the web service is that it's inherently configurable at deployment time. So you can see here I've wired it up here, and that means one thing on my on a dev box, on a test box, something very different in an actual production environment, and so we know about those different configurations.
Great.
Okay, so at this point I have the basic app design. I've got the components and services laid out. Really the next step for me now is to figure out, is this the right design for the application? And is it going to map well to the data center? So to do that, I'm going to look at the same diagram that Jim's team has just provided us.
Yeah, that looks a lot like the document that Jim was just working on.
It basically is, with one important difference, and that is I actually get to see the components of the application in a deployment configuration. So I've got the storefront web app sitting out on the web application server. I've got the database deployed. I've got the catalog client, and I can see how the components talk to each other through which communication pathways. So it gives me this view where I see the boundaries, I can see where the security boundaries are, and so forth.
Yeah, so this is the current implementation of your system as it exists
exactly.
today.
This is a starting place. So the first thing I need to do then is take the new services that we just designed. I'm just going to create a vertical tab group and actually lay these on the diagram and see if we can validate this. So I'll start with the web service. It's the first thing that I designed. The first thing I try to do is put it on the web content server, and I get feedback immediately that says, I can't do that.
I remember Jim said that you didn't allow web services to run on the web server.
It's right. It's a hosting constraint that says you can't do that, but I can deploy that to the web service server that he's created so that I actually know that that thing will be able to live there. So I'm given that kind of guidance up front. I don't have to figure out where that's supposed to live. I can do the very same thing with the other applications very quickly in terms of where they're supposed to live and get immediate feedback from the tool on whether that's going to validate.
So it's not only validating, right, that it can be hosted there, but that the components can actually talk to each other based on the network topology, is that right?
That's exactly right. So there is that hosting constraint, but also, can I talk to the other components? If I've configured component A and component B to talk to each other over HTTP port 80, over SOAP, am I actually going to be able to do that in the data center?
Great.
Do they have to be co-located or not? So what we can do now is sort of go deeper, because we've talked about hosting, we've talked about communication pathways. What about all the configuration and settings in IIS, in ASP.NET, in various servers? What I can do with this diagram is go and validate. And what that does is the model underneath both the data center and the application is rich with a bunch of configuration information that I can set in the tool. And Jim was showing those settings earlier.
Yeah.
So what I see right away is that I have a problem with this. So I'm getting a constraint error in the error list at the bottom. And the diagrams actually show me that there's a problem between the web server and the web service that I've mapped to that web server. It doesn't tell me which one is correct. It just tells me there's a problem on either end. You know, I could ask the data center team to change it, but it's very likely that me as an app architect am going to need to fit the data center the way it exists today.
Great.
So what it's telling me is that I have an impersonation property for the web service that's set to false, and the web servers require impersonated web services. So the really nice thing is being able to navigate right from that error to the actual setting and go and change that in place. So this is much, much better than having to sift through the configuration files.
Great. Yeah, that's the guy who's had to go and find the config file setting for authentication or impersonation.
And, you know, in the past, I mean, this is something we just wouldn't catch.
Sure.
Prior to deployment. We do our best user experience, but ultimately there would definitely be issues because of the configuration settings.
All right. So you're pretty much done with this now?
Yeah, I'm done. Really the next step, just to revalidate. I can see that the tool tells me I've got no errors. And the only thing I need to do now, the dev team's ready to get started, so I'll go ahead and resolve the work item. And that'll let Lori know and the dev team know that the architecture is complete.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks,
Sir.
David. Appreciate it.
I'd like to check on the work. Don't put the light on it.
I feel like I should have brought my track shoes out here.
Yeah, I think so. I'd like to check on the work on the team, and I'm in Excel, and I refreshed, and I can immediately see that my architects are complete with the design. I didn't have to go and bug them and ask them. I just was able to use it in the list that I was tracking my information. I noticed that David has attached the architecture diagram to the work item. I can get right to there and see the componentry that he's designed. This is what I'd like to use to base my development schedule off of. So I'm going to use Microsoft Project to schedule all the work. Here's a start at my project plan, and I have the components down here. I'd like to first collect all the tasks that my architects have created through the course of their design. In the past, I'd have to go ask them or cut and paste this information in here and hope I got all the work. But now, since we're all using Visual Studio Team System, I can import those work items right from within Project. I can run queries of the entire work item database and insert the last few tasks that they've created right in my project environment.
So, Lori, this looks a lot like what you've been doing in Excel, but now you're doing it in Project.
That's right. The team just sees the work in their queues, and I'm able to manipulate the same information in the tools that I choose to work in.
Now, did you have to create this project file from the beginning, from scratch?
This was one of the templates that came with my process methodology.
Great.
And I can take these tasks and I can organize them into my project plan, into the components. I can make my work item assignments to members of the team. Let's see if I can find Eric in here. I can change states and tasks, do my dependency analysis, check and load balance my different iterations, and all the things that you'd expect to do using the full power of Microsoft Project.
All right, because I don't know how to do that in Project. I don't know how to make that pretty yellow picture. So you're telling me that comes out of the box.
Yeah,
Visual Studio.
yeah.
That's good for me.
Project. Exactly. So then I publish the information. In the past, I just send a mail to my team and say, here's a new project plan, come and get your work. And I'd be lucky if they came and got all their work. So, or I'd have to cut and paste all into Outlook and send people their tasks. But with Visual Studio Team System, I just publish my project plan, and I know they can get working right away. So I feel pretty good about my schedule of work, but I want to make sure that what we're going to do is going to meet our customer requirements. So I have a basic breakdown of requirements, and I've chosen to do this in Excel. I like to track where they're sourced from and run my charts and make sure that I have tasks associated with each requirement. I feel like I've got a good coverage here, but my marketing and business analyst team don't use this tool. They use Borland Caliber RM to manage requirements. So I want to make sure that all the requirements that they've collected maps down to work that we're doing in our team. So I'm going to look at Borland Caliber RM. First thing I can do is import work items from Visual Studio Team System. And these work items show up as any other requirement in Borland Caliber RM, and I can manipulate them just as if they were native to the tool. At first, I like to start by drawing a traceability matrix. I can see all the Borland, all the requirements from my business managers here in rows, and I can see all the work being done on my team in columns. I can see that one of my requirements is not yet met. It's really simple to just use Caliber to set up basic traceability links. And then I can run a traceability diagram. I need to save that first. I can run a traceability diagram that shows the work being done all the way from my order flexibility requirement tracing through to the work being done on my development team in Visual Studio Team System.
So how deep is that integration, though, Lori? I mean, that's a nice picture, but what else can I do with this?
Well, the integration is very deep. In fact, Caliber RM is so well integrated with Visual Studio Team System, I can bring up the work items and manipulate the fields and properties all from within the Caliber environment.
That's great. Now, I remember you Caliber users. Excellent. Hey, I remember you had assigned some work to Eric. So if he shows up, I'm going to go and talk to him for a little while. I'll let you know if he's late.
Thanks.
Sure. Hey, Eric.
Hey, Eric, how's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
Not too bad, thanks. Not too bad. You know, you caught me right in the middle of doing some work.
That's good. Lori's going to be happy to hear that.
That's true. That's true. You know, in the past, you would never see me using one of these visual designers while I'm still coding. I'd wait until I was done, but then use one of those things for documentation. But now, the class designer that's part of Visual Studio Team System, I have a live view of my source code. Any change I make in my source, shows up directly in my design. It's really just another view, and they're always in sync.
Great.
Now, this work is a lower priority, so I want to put it aside and move on. In the past, I'd have a problem. I could either check in my work and risk breaking the build. At AdventureWorks, if you break the build, they make you wear a funny hat. Or I could keep my changes on my local machine. But now, Visual Studio Team System, I could use shelving. Shelving lets me push my changes onto our Team Foundation server into a private branch that's created for me automatically. So my changes are safe.
Now, while you're doing that, I've had to create private branches before, and that's a lot of work to create a private branch.
Absolutely.
And it's even worse because when I'm done, I have to destroy the private branch, and that's a lot more work.
Absolutely. With Team System, that private branch is created for me automatically, and when I bring my changes back to my local machine, that private branch is cleaned up for me, all automatically.
That's great.
Very, very slick. All right, let's check and see if I have any new work.
I think Lori's been very busy.
I suspect she has. I suspect she has. All right, got a new work item to create new business logic. This will help AdventureWorks connect to Wingtip toys and see their inventory. So David got me started with an existing project by generating code from his architecture. So now, I have a pretty good idea of the code that I need to write, but I'm not a marketing guy, I'm a developer, so I'm not going to cut and paste code up here. Instead, I'm going to use snippets. Snippets are a new feature in Visual Studio Team System that lets you boilerplate a number of bits of code. So it ships with tons and tons of very common code, you know, accessing databases, try finally blocks, things like that.
Implementing business logic.
Implementing business logic. That one I'll keep to myself. All right. Now, I'll go ahead and mark my work item as being ready for check-in. But before I check this work in, I want to write some unit tests. So in the past, that meant starting up a new Visual Studio project and writing more code. But now with Team System, I can generate unit tests automatically. I can generate tests at the method level, the class level, or even for a whole namespace. The tests that I generate are added to my check-in. So when I finally do check in my work, my tests can be shared by the rest of my team.
So you didn't write any of this code. This was all generated for you.
It was all generated for me.
That's great.
Team System had to look at my source code and generated code to test my methods. Now here's another really neat feature that I wanted to point out. By default, when Team System generates tests for me, those tests don't pass automatically.
It's a very good thing.
Yes, yes. So I have to manually look at my tests and make sure they're doing what I want them to do. In this particular case, as long as my expected result equals my actual result, I'm happy. So we'll go ahead and take out this last assert. Let's give our new test a try. So besides having a way of generating tests, Team System gives me a way to run my tests and organize their results. I can see my new test show up in the test view.
So you're showing tests right out of Visual Studio now?
Yes.
That's great.
Yes. I don't have to talk to a test manager to run my tests. I can run them right in the tool.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. A couple new features I want to point out here. I can choose to run my tests locally, or I can choose to run them remotely in the lab. I also know that code coverage data tells me how hard my tests are working. In the past, I'd have to spark up another tool and really struggle to collect that data. With Team System, it's just a click away. Oh, we can see that our test passed.
So you can see the results of the test in Visual Studio.
Yes, I can monitor all the progress of my tests as they run.
That's great.
I can see my test passed, but I don't know how effective my tests were. So let's go ahead and have a look at code coverage results. Now, Team System does a really good job of showing me code coverage data in the traditional way, in a grid, organized by class, organized by namespace. But code coverage is such an integrated part of Visual Studio Team System that I can see what lines are covered and what lines aren't covered right in the source.
That's cool.
Now I can see here that my unit test missed an entire method. So this method's not being called at all by my test. But I can fix that. I'll just create another unit test for that method, just a click away. All right, now that we have unit tests and we have our code written, let's try and check in. In the past, when I was ready to check in, I'd have to cut and paste 10 or 20 times to get all the information from my check-in into the tool that we use for defect tracking, the tool that we use for requirements tracking, and probably send some email. Now with Team System, I can go ahead and pick whatever work item I want, and it gets associated with my check-in. Oh, hey, I think there's some new policy for this project that we just created. Let's have a look and see what that policy is.
So I see that the tool just reminded you that you had a policy violation.
Yes.
But how do you find out what you have to do to satisfy that policy?
You know, there is help all over Visual Studio Team System. Press F1, there's help right there for me. Now I can see that static analysis is an automated code review. It's going to look at my source code, look at the control paths, and look for common problems in performance, design, and security. And this help is good. It tells me how to enable static analysis for my project. It's great. But what's also really cool is that besides seeing Microsoft Visual Studio help, I can see how static analysis fits into the development process at AdventureWorks. So this help that I'm looking at is custom help, probably written by my manager, that's hosted on Team Foundation server. I can look at this help in one tool, same place as I look at regular Microsoft help. All right. All right, now that we have a good idea how to enable static analysis, let's go ahead and do that. Just one click away, I just have to change build configurations.
So now when you rebuild now, you're not only going to get your normal compiler errors, but then any sort of warnings from the static analysis?
Exactly. And it looks like static analysis caught a problem in our code. Looking at this error, it's a tricky one. It's a security problem. We have a method in our new business component that returns a member from our class. That's fine. But the member in that class is marked as read-only. Since we've returned it from a method, someone could tamper with the values in that member. It's a security problem. Static analysis tells me I can fix this by returning a clone of the array. We'll go ahead and fix that right now.
Let me guess, you got a snippet for fixing that bug?
Funny, I do have a snippet that fixes that bug.
That's amazing.
Perfect. All right, let's check in now. Let me go ahead and reassociate my work item. The static analysis does a very in-depth analysis. There's some problems in my existing projects. What's really neat about policy, first, it catches you if you forget, but also, if you need to, you can override it.
Now, I'm willing to bet that if you override this, Lori's going to find out about it.
Absolutely. There's a lot of visibility here. So as soon as I finish my check-in, the right people are going to find out, and our project keeps moving along.
Eric, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.
I'd like to refresh my project plan and see how things are going. I can immediately see the resolutions and progress that Eric has made. And I'm really excited about this because in the past, I'd have to call a status meeting just to understand, are you done yet? And my team is very excited that they don't have to attend the status meeting as well. It's just right here in my project plan.
All right, so thank you, Lori. And now what we're going to do is we're going to sort of segue into the next day. And if we were to come in and talk to Tom, who is a tester with AdventureWorks, we're going to sort of start with him and see what he's doing. Hi, Tom.
Hey, Rick. How you doing?
Good.
So what I do when I come in the morning is I sync down the latest stuff, and then I want to see how things went the night before with the build. So it looks like on my build summary, I've got a good build that's ready for test. I've got production, debug, and test builds. But I want to drill down a little bit more to see how things are looking. So I can get some more information. I can look at exactly what projects were touched. And not only that, but I can also look at what kind of code coverage I got on the build verification tests that were run, which are right along here on my right. And then the next thing is I can look at the test results. So I've got like 8 tests that I ran. And it looks like 8 out of 8 passed, so that's great. And this is the really cool part. I've got a list of all the work items. So this is the stuff that Eric checked in, that David checked in, and I can see exactly what he's been working on.
So before you had the team system, how did you create this report?
Oh God, it was a pain. We had to walk around and do it manually. And the problem was, when we did all this stuff manually, the minute that we got it posted up on the site, it was already out of date.
Got it.
It's a real hassle. So now that I've got this report up,
So let me ask you another question.
Sure.
This is interesting. So are you saying if I use the automated nightly build system for the Visual Studio Team system, that I will get this report generated for me for free every night?
That's correct. I didn't do anything. I just came in, brought it up. There's the report.
Great.
And it's up to date because it's pulling it off of our servers. All right, so with that, let's go and see what kind of work items I have assigned to me. I know Lori's been busy.
She has indeed been busy. I think we should watch her.
Yeah, this was empty when I went home last night, but okay, it looks like I've got some load tests that I need to create, so let me go ahead and do that. Now what I've got here is I've already got I'm sorry, let me back up. Before I do this load test, I want to do a quick sanity check. I want to make sure that this is a good build and not waste my time doing this load test. So what I'm going to do this is I'm going to I've already brought down Eric's unit tests, which you saw him create, but I've also got some of my own UI tests. So I can do this really quickly as I select the 2 different tests that I want to run. And I've got 2 different environments going on here. I've got our web application is going on for doing our orders. We also have a kiosk application. So I've got these 2 tests selected. I'll click Run. And you'll notice here that it brings up in my test results window that Eric's test is passed. It's also bringing up my UI tests and starting to execute those. And there we go.
So now, as I understand it, the Visual Studio Team System doesn't include a rich client testing tool.
Right. We've been using a test partner from CompuWare for years, and what's really cool is that CompuWare is taking advantage of the integration that Microsoft's providing so that their tool actually shows up where right here, I can bring this up, show the details of my UI test, and you'll see.
So when you selected that test, that was actually a test partner test?
That was a test partner test, and I have their exact results showing up in Visual Studio. Before, I had to run a separate tool.
Wow, that's great. This makes the test partner integration like a first-class piece of the team system.
It really does.
Great.
Okay, so now I know, quick sanity check, everything's working. I know Lori wants me to do some load tests, so let me create that load test. So, a load test is basically a container of other types of tests. I could actually do a load test that has Eric's tests in there if I want to. I'm just going to do it on the web page. So, I'm going to create a test first, and I'm going to purchase one of those baseballs that I see. Oh, you're right. I do want to
do. You want to do a web test instead?
That's a good idea.
I think it might be a good idea to record a web test first.
So we've got a web test coming up here. Now you'll notice as we go along here, as I'm clicking through and creating this test, so I'm going to do one of these cool baseballs, that down along the left-hand side I've got a list of everything that I've been clicking on. Again, in the past I actually had to run a separate program to adventureworks.com to do all this web test recording. So I've created it. Looks like my order is good. Submit it. And then I'll save it. And you notice as I save it, everything comes back over here into Visual Studio. Now, what's really cool, Rick, is I can step through this and verify that it recorded exactly what I thought it was recording.
Now, what if I wanted to data bind all of those fields so that it doesn't always order from you?
Right, everything from Tom Arnold all the time. Right. Actually, I can do data binding. It's really simple. I just click on the fields that I want to data bind, attach it to my database, and we're good to go.
That's great.
So let me step through this one line at a time. And you'll notice that I can get the request string that we're sending out, the response that's coming back, as well as the body that's being sent back as well. And the cool thing is that I used to have to go to Eric and say, so what exactly are we sending and what's coming back? But now I can just do it myself. And then, of course, I've got the rendered page that shows up. This is really cool. So I'm hitting the play button, so it'll go ahead and run the rest of the test. It looks like it ran okay. Now I'm going to create my load test. So it's the same idea as before. I come in, I tell it that I want to add a new item, and it brings up this load test wizard, and it makes things really easy for me. So I'm going to call this one Purchase. And here's my load test wizard. Now this is really cool because it just steps me through everything that I need to do. I'm going to select the test that I want to run. There's the one I just added. I can select how my browser is going to behave, what browsers I want to emulate, also what kind of network I want to simulate. Now this is the really cool part. It's pretty rare in my field to have someone who's an expert on running and diagnosing performance issues. So that's one of the best things about this wizard, is that it helps me understand exactly what type of data I need to be collecting on the servers and understand the performance characteristics. So what I'm going to do is type in the machine that I'm running this on, and then I simply click the different things that I want to monitor. It's as simple as that. Next thing I'm doing is I can adjust what type of load I want to do. I can either have a constant load running or I can step it up over a period of time. And then, once again, I need to tell it where to save the data. And I'm going to run this for 1 minute instead of 10. Is that okay?
That's fine with me.
Great. All right, click Finish. And I need to come over to my test view window. And here's my new load test. And I'll run it. Now, one thing that I didn't point out, Rick, is that all the stuff that I just entered in that wizard shows up over here. And I can tweak it further as I learn more about how I should be using this load test. But everything's put in there for me.
Great.
So it makes it really easy. Okay, so my load test starts. And you'll notice it's actually showing up down here in my test results window. And I can get some details on it. See how things are going. And you'll notice it's already started. So it's graphing, and it's doing 5-second intervals of what's going on. Okay, so now I don't really know exactly what the different thresholds I should be paying attention to, but Microsoft does. And what I mean by that is they'll go and say your CPU should be running at a certain percentage of usage, your server should be behaving a certain way, your drives should be reacting as far as how much idle time, things like that. And so as my load is running along, you'll see over here on the left-hand side, I've got these little X's that are showing up where it's flagging things that I want to pay attention to. So I'm looking at the idle time, and I'm just going to drag it over here onto the chart and see what it looks like. And, well, it's kind of hard to see. It's actually down here at the very bottom. It's kind of flatlined. And that's a bad thing because we have no disk idle time. Value 0. That's pretty ugly. So that's something I need to tell Eric about.
So Tom, you didn't have to go in and set those thresholds or have to know what the appropriate sort of values were for an ASP.NET performance counter. That came out of the box.
That's exactly right. Straight out of the box, all the thresholds were set. I can go in and tweak them myself when I start knowing exactly what I want to watch for, but here's what Microsoft recommends. It's pretty cool. All right, so I know that we've got a concern about how we're, how much disk time we're using. So I'm going to create a bug. And what this is going to allow me to do is that in the past, I'd send bugs over to Eric. He's like, well, I don't see it working on mine or having a problem on my machine. This must be your machine, Tom. So what I get to do is I get to attach the exact same bug to my bug report, and he'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Disk is thrashing under load. So I'll assign this to Eric. And you'll notice down here under the links or under the attachments tab, that's where my results are showing up. And Eric will see the same thing.
Tom, thanks a lot. I'm going to go over and see if Eric got that bug yet.
You bet.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
I'm back, and I hear you have a problem.
You know, it looks that way. I think Tom found a bug.
Hard to believe as that is.
Yes, it's very hard to believe. It's very hard to believe. You know, in the past, it's a performance issue. When something like this came up, I'd spend a lot of time trying to figure out what Tom saw. Now with Team System, I can see exactly the same results that Tom saw. It takes a lot of the guesswork right out of the picture. Now, I really like fixing these sorts of bugs, and I'll tell you why. So Visual Studio Team System makes it really easy for me to generate unit tests, so I can test early in my process. I also have a very simple way of running my tests, so I can test often. That really lets me drive up the quality of what I check in. That lets my test team concentrate on more in-depth problems like this one here. So they've done a great job finding this bug. Now, when Tom ran his load test, he picked a couple performance counters to collect and to chart. In the past, if there were other performance counters I wanted for my investigation, I'd have to ask Tom to rerun his test. Not very productive. Now with Team System, when that load test is running, all of the relevant counters are being collected and propagated to Team Foundation server. I can go ahead and chart any performance counter that I want, regardless of whether Tom charted it or not. That data is always there for me. All right. It's obvious we have a performance problem here. Let me go and find the source. You know, in the past, it was really hard to configure an application for profiling, especially if that application was an ASP.NET application.
Okay, I have to ask, how many of you have tried to profile an ASP.NET application? Okay, the brave ones right there.
I can see some hands of set environment variables and fiddled with configuration files. Now with Team System, I can just pick the project, even if that project is ASP.NET. Team System figures out all the configuration for me.
That's huge.
Let's go ahead and collect some performance data.
So you're running your instrumented build now?
I am. What Team System has done is inserted probes to help me gather performance data. Now the application has come up, and in the past, I would start trying to drive this application myself and guess what Tom was doing to see the problem. Now with Team System, I have access to the exact same load test that Tom was running. I'll just go ahead and run the same test. The only difference is I'll gather performance data this time. We'll go ahead and let this test run a little bit and gather some data. When I shut down, Team System gathers all of the data it's collected into a report for me. Let's have a look at that report. Now, in the past, performance data is very difficult to read. It's kind of intimidating. It's lots of data. It's hard to know where to get started. Now, Team System, a number of views are generated on top of that data. The first view that I get to see is a summary of all the suspicious points in that data. Looking at the chart on the right, I can see a ton of garbage collection activity.
That should not be red, right?
That should not be all red like that. My application is spending almost all of its time garbage collecting. It's got to be a problem. Now, if I look at the functions that have been taking the longest, I can see my function is right at the top of the list. So let's have a closer look. So what's really happening here is that my function, getProducts, is calling another function, merge inventory. And that function seems to be the one that's taking the most time. I've got a pretty good starting point now, so let's go right to the source. I can see from my source code that I'm making a pretty obvious mistake. I'm reading a file in a server-side application. It's going to cause lots of disk thrash, very similar to what Tom was seeing. We'll go ahead and fix that.
Snippet?
Snippet.
That's so.
All right. Got our performance problem investigated and fixed. In the past, as a developer, I'd be done. Just wait for more bugs to come in. But now, Visual Studio Team System and one of his partners, Avocode, I can be a lot more proactive. Avocode has used the extensibility features in Visual Studio Team System to build a wizard. That wizard allows me to create a management pack configured for my custom application.
Wow.
AdventureWorks in this case. Now, you see me write a lot of code, or put a lot of code in, and fix some bugs. So there's lots of code churn in this application. I want to make sure my operations guys have a heads up that lots of changes are coming down the pipe. So what I'm going to say is, if any ASP.NET page takes more than 2.5 seconds, then there's a problem there. So we're monitoring this application a little bit more aggressively than we normally would, because there's so many changes. If there is a problem, I want to make sure I have enough data collected to investigate, find the root cause. So I'll collect .NET performance counters, and I'll read from the AdventureWorks application log. This wizard lets me do that very simply. So when the wizard's finished, I have a configuration pack that's part of my check-in. When I check in, this work will be available to my operations people, and they can monitor AdventureWorks in a much more proactive manner than they did in the past.
Eric, thanks a lot. I hope not to see you again.
All right.
And now my favorite thing to do, check up on the status in my project plan.
Holy cow.
Yeah, they've been busy. But I want to look at, there's more than just tasks going on in the project. I want to look at the big picture. Let me go to the project portal. This was created for me with the project wizard I ran at the beginning of this project. It stores all my document templates and all the documents the teams have created and other information through the course of working on this project. I also can link to interesting information resources like live MSDN feeds through RSS. But I'm here to look at the key metrics to manage our project. With Visual Studio Team System, I have a lot more than just bugs that I can look at. I can see tasks and code churn and test results. And I didn't have to bug the team to get this data. I didn't have to run around, copy and paste it from a lot of different tools. It all came through the natural course of the team using Visual Studio Team System.
Lori, did you have to create these reports?
No, it all came through the natural course of my team using Visual Studio. But a lot of these reports came right out of the box for me. And these reports are so useful for me as a project manager. I can see whether my team's doing work on time, how much the requirements are churning, what quality level of work they're checking in, how productive they are. These reports make me such a better project manager, and they're based on Microsoft proven practices. So I see a problem with my code coverage trend. I'd expect this late in the product cycle that I would have a much higher coverage of tests. I can drill through on these reports from the historical trend to the component. In the past, I'd look at this component as an example, and I'd see a low bug count and a high test pass, and I'd say, hey,
ship it.
We're good to go. But with Visual Studio Team System, I have a lot of other data. I can see there's been a lot of activity on the component. In fact, there's little to no code coverage at all. So these tests aren't covering much code. I can drill into that and see the specific test and the test owner. So I need to go and address this problem right away in order to course correct the team.
Lori, I appreciate all your help today. Thank you very much. So what we hope to have showed you today was basically a brief overview of the breadth of what we're doing with the Visual Studio Team System, focusing on a tool that was designed for productivity, a tool that was designed for deep integration, and a tool that was designed to create a deeply extensible platform. Now, speaking of the extensibility, we certainly couldn't have done this demo, and we certainly wouldn't be able to satisfy the needs of all of you, our customers, if it weren't for a broad sort of industry support of the team system. And so not only are the folks listed here on this slide, but if you're watching the news feed, you'll see over 15 partners who are making announcements with support of the team system. So I'm going to finish up with a roadmap slide, and there's two things that you should take away from this. The first is that the Visual Studio Team System is part of Visual Studio 2005, the codename Whidbey release. And that release will be released in the first half of calendar year 2005. So there is no difference between Visual Studio Whidbey and the team system. The team system is a set of functionality or features, if you will, that are part of Visual Studio Whidbey. The second thing I want you to take away from this slide, and it's even more important, is that if you go to the Visual Studio, any of the Visual Studio booths in the exposition hall, they will be handing out our latest version of the Community Technology Preview. Now, the Community Technology Preview is a set of bits that is pre-beta. They were burned about a week and a half ago. And it includes not only all the Visual Studio Pro tools, the compilers, the framework, the runtime, but it also has most of the client-side tools that you've seen here today, including unit testing, code coverage, and load testing. So please make sure you head down to the booth and get yourself a copy of the Community Technology Preview. So the last thing I'll leave you with is a roadmap slide. I'm sorry, a slide that lists all of the sessions that are going on around the team system. Because we had not actually announced the Visual Studio team system, all of these showed up as TBHs in the program, and many of you probably wondered what the heck those guys from Developer Division were actually doing. So what I hope you take away from this presentation is that not only is it an exciting time to be in the tools business, but I think it's an exciting time to be in the IT space. That there will be a lot of innovation going on, through our partners, innovation with our partners, innovation with Microsoft, and that innovation is going to drive significant customer value. That innovation is focusing on reducing the complexity, increasing the communication, and driving the predictability and success that we know you all want and we know that you all need. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your week at TechEd.